Today, we're going to talk about suicide. Why so many men are finding the answer in leaving this world. What we can do to prevent that, and what we can do as men to really come together and make a difference so this doesn't have to happen. And of course, I gotta say this, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a men's coach. I deal with people who have addiction, I deal with people who have social issues. Within my groups, things like suicide do come up a lot, and we'll talk about that. But if you are thinking about it, if it is messing with you, I want you to pick up the phone and at the very minimum, call the suicide hotline. But more importantly, make a commitment that for 6 months minimum, you're going to go to therapy or see a psychologist or psychiatrist to work on this. Hey guys, my name is Steve Mayeda and I'm a men's coach in Austin, Texas. I'm a BJJ practitioner, a Wim Hof enthusiast. I have an amazing family, 4 awesome boys and a beautiful wife. And what this podcast is about being the better man. What we talk about is tried and true because we've been doing it with groups of men just like you for over 12 years. Listen up, and I hope you enjoy. So look, I live in an interesting world. So we're going to talk about a couple of things here. One is the whole geopolitical reason of why men are committing suicide at such a high rate. And just to put things in perspective, suicide and overdoses cause more deaths in the United States to males right now than car accidents. I think this might be the first time since cars that this has actually happened. But more importantly, what we're going to talk about is how men who might feel like they want to kill themselves or undervalued or that they just want to give up on everything don't have to. And some of the stories about how those guys came out perhaps broken per se and put themselves back together. And lastly, what we're going to talk about is prevention. And I'm just going to tell you right now, if you suspect somebody is thinking about this or thinking about suicide, what you do is you call the police, you get them to do a wellness check, and you let the authorities take it from there. Don't feel bad about doing that. Sure, some people can overreact on it, but this is one of those things that if you're questioning it, it's not a bad idea to take that extra precautionary measure and make sure your friend or your loved one stays alive. So look, in my world, there's a lot of suicide. And I know that sounds really grim, and to be honest, it is. But as you guys know, I'm a men's coach. I'm somebody that specializes in the field of addiction, mainly because I've always had a problem with addiction. And I'm sure also, you know, I specialize in social issues and learning to communicate and be sexual, be social in all the right ways. But when you're in that world of addiction, you see a lot of people die. And I've always said, you know, about once a month, somebody I know either overdoses or they kill themselves. Some months that may not happen, but other months that might happen 2 or 3 times. And sad to say, that's just the nature of the beast. Now, because of this, a friend of mine reached out to me last week because his friend had killed himself. I don't know all the details of the story, and to be honest, I don't really need to, because this is really a story about the friend who now lives with that pain, thinking about what he could have done to prevent it, what he could have done to see the right things, and how he could prevent some of those same feelings in himself from happening. And so he reached out to me and he said, hey man, I've heard you talk about this a lot. I know that you and your recovery thing, a lot of people die and you see a lot of things like that. I don't really know what to do. So I've been talking to him all week about it, and sadly to say, I've been in this situation so many times. And like I said, I know a lot of people who die, and some of those people I've just met in passing, some of those people I talked to or shared friendships with, went to dinner with, but some of them were my best friends. And I know the feeling of what it is when your best friend calls you up and he says, man, I'm thinking about relapsing. And I say, dude, it's 1 a.m., man. I'm in bed with my wife and I can't come and meet up. That night he relapses, and 10 or 11 days later, he's dead from a drug overdose. That's not a good feeling to carry around, but more importantly, that's not a good feeling to put on yourself. It's not a good mentality to think that that was your fault. So if I seem like somebody that's a little bit desensitized to this, or I take it kind of lightly and so on, I really don't take it lightly at all. In fact, it's a big part of my life, and it's a big part to help other people who might have this in their life. I mean, that is my job. That is what I do. I've just seen a lot of it, and I handle it probably differently from the norm. So now let's talk about one of the things that I actually hate about this whole story is the whole geopolitical reason why addiction, suicide, this internal angst is rising in males across the US and the world. Now, I know I said I hate it, but part of me loves this discussion. I myself, seeing these struggles in my life to a very high degree, one, knowing the feeling of what it's like to want to die and decide to take your own life. Two, going to sleep night after night on opiates, on alcohol, barbiturates, you name it, hoping that I wouldn't wake up to deal with the hangover, being dope sick, and the reality of pure horror that I made my life into. After I stopped living that way, which is a whole nother story, it made me think, why does this happen to people? Why does this idea or phenomenon of addiction, suicide, hating the world, contempt for everything around you exist? And to be honest, that's something that I've thought about since I've struggled with addiction at 12 and 14 years old. But this last time, when I got clean when I was 30, I decided to put all that on the back burner, to not worry about it, to give myself a couple years or whatever it took to get my feet under me so I could just get clean. Because at that time, when I got clean, man, I had a lot of baggage, I had a lot of problems, and those things needed to be fixed. And then after about 3 or 4 years of being clean and getting my feet underneath me, getting myself established, building my own power up, I actually gave a speech on addiction and where it comes from and the war on drugs and all these different things and what it means personally to the addict. I gave that speech at the 21 convention in 2016, and because of whatever differences, they've decided not to make it public. I do think it's majorly important for us to discuss the socioeconomic reasons why addiction takes place in males. Why, when you go into any rehab, any prison, any recovery group, whatever style it is, there are 80% men and 20% women. Why does this happen? But one of the things that I absolutely hate about this discussion is talking about how feminism has caused it, or how the economy has caused it, or how you were put down, or the area you grew up in caused it. None of that is going to key into your solution for bettering your life now. So to the person who does want to kill himself, to the person who is a drug addict trying to get clean, understanding any of that stuff just delays you. It keeps you in your own prison. So if you do have pain, the only thing that studying those things will do is put you in an echo chamber of your own confusion. You will not progress as a man. You will not progress to be a better person, and you will not dig yourself out of this hole. Now, that being said, these issues are majorly important, but they're not going to be solved by gossip, making excuses, driving self-pity, or any of these different things that they can do. Let me just put this into a real-life perspective. Is the young man who killed himself was very into these things. He was always into the latest Jordan Peterson, how to fix your life, study yourself in all these ways. And all these people are saying good things, and they might be true, and they might be right, and they might be able to be debatable and so on, but they do not get to the internal pain, the internal secrets, and the dark stuff within you. You need to focus on that. And the more that you blame somebody else for your life being screwed up, you will never get to a point of power in your life. So yes, I do think it's important to look at why males are suffering. I do think it's important to look at why we as a whole, we as a society need to start changing. But if you have a problem, don't worry about that. Stop fighting, stop making excuses, go and seek out some help that can help you. Talk to people who have fought with depression and gotten past it, who have thought about suicide or attempted it and no longer think that way. And I'll tell you this right now, I'm one of them. And perhaps for another time, or you can listen to some other podcasts where you hear my story, man, I've seen some dark stuff. But what's even more important is a lot of my friends have seen way darker things in their life, and they don't think that way anymore. So let's talk about this last part, prevention, dealing with the aftermath. So if you know somebody that you suspect is thinking about any of this, or they're talking about it, man, reach out to somebody who knows, like do a wellness check or call a therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist. They'll point you in the right direction, but take action on it. The thing is that you don't know. And what is so important, what I tell people, especially parents who have kids that are drug addicts or who are suicidal or are having major life problems, I always tell them, you're not the one that's going to fix them. You're going to be the one that's going to reach out for help that will ultimately get them the help they need. But the person they're going to listen to most, the person that's going to get them to say, hey, maybe I should reconsider my life, is most likely not going to be you. It's a strange thing, but the people closest in our lives aren't the ones who give us these life-changing moments. And it's such a crazy thing because the people that we care about most, we can't have the impact that we want to have on them. This is why you got to go with the protocol. If you suspect somebody has a drug addiction problem, they're suicidal, they have a mental disorder that you just can't handle, talk to people who can handle it. That doesn't make you bad. You're not betraying them. They might say that. To be honest, they're going to tell you all sorts of stuff. Call the cops, get a wellness check. They'll do a series of tests or ask them a few questions and see if there's somebody that they need to take action upon to put them in front of the help that they need. Now, that being said, that sounds like a really passive thing, but there's some more active things you could do. Spend time with your friends in the right ways. One of the things that always comes to mind whenever something like this happens, like a friend of mine tells me his roommate killed himself, or one of my buddies relapses and he just wants to end it all, or whatever the situation is, one of the things that I do is I just go and I sit next to somebody, man. I pass the time. It isn't my job to dive deep in them. It's my job to spend time with them. When you spend time with somebody, knowing that they care, that's important. But another thing that's clear in my lifestyle and what I do, and part of just me being a coach and perhaps being in recovery so long, is that I don't co-sign people's bull. So when they tell me nothing's wrong, or when they tell me they're good and I know they're not good, I don't go, okay, man, you're good. I say, okay, man, if you don't want to talk about it, that's cool. But if you do want to talk about it, that's cool too. But if you just need me to sit next to you and hang out, I'm down with that, man. And see, that's what we need to focus on, is spending quality time with people. Having people around you that you know you can count on. Having people around you that when I'm hurt and I don't want to be around anybody, and opening up to somebody or sharing something with somebody is taking a risk. I'm not going to be around somebody that might judge me or might be confused by the situation. I mean, especially with something like suicide or addiction, people overreact to these things all the time. What do you want? This dog's trying to photobomb me. He always tries to photobomb me. God, man. Messing up my vlogs. I also think what's so important is you as a man, or you as a friend, you as a woman, whatever you are, queer, gender, non-conformist, whatever. Share your story. Don't put it on people. Share your story. Share your story in a moment with somebody in front of you. Not somebody that's just a stranger, but somebody that you know and can get to know. Part of you being you and a human being and being social, and what I always try and talk about, is that you need to share you with somebody. You need to share you with somebody that isn't going to leave 10 minutes down the road. And you might be afraid of that, and if you are, man, that's why you see a therapist, or that's why you go to a support group, or one of these things where anonymity has some sort of value to it. But what you need to do is start sharing who you are with people that can see you and know you. And as confusing as that might be, as hurtful as that may have been in the past, that is one of the most important things. Because when you don't do that, what do? You start polarizing, you start isolating, you start getting confused, you start being demanding, you start doing the opposite of your pain and searching to protect yourself from that. You start objectifying people and seeing them as something that can either hurt you or help you. You start seeing things in a power dynamic that, is this something that's going to help me or hurt me? How can I get my own benefit? And I'll tell you this, when we're our pure expressions, human beings don't do that sort of thing. Obviously, this is a pretty big discussion that we need to keep having, and it's something that happens a lot within my groups and within my life. Unfortunately, probably suicide, overdoses, all these things are going to be a reality that I deal with and see for a long time in my life. To be honest, I'm not hating on it. It's just the reality that I deal with. One thing I'll say is we can look at all the statistics that we want. I can sit here and say that males and females and whatever and feminism and all this sort of stuff. I can look at the stats. I can look at the stats of addiction. I can look at the stats of white males, of black males, and so on. But what I know is your personal experience to change isn't dependent on a statistic. It is dependent upon what you do right now. Meaning that in my statistic, for me to stay clean, for me to not kill myself, for me to come back from a suicide attempt, for me to have all the brain damage that I have in order to live the life that I have, it's almost statistically impossible that I got there. With just being clean and not using drugs for over 10 years, the statistic on that is 0.1%. 1%. And I would never put money on me on a 1 in 1,000 sort of deal or whatever that is. And I did it. I accomplished that goal. And the way I accomplished that goal was taking actions. Taking actions when I doubted myself, when it hurt, when it was really effed up and nothing worked. And there was no reason for me to have faith in anything really working. So really what these statistics are saying is that only 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100 or whatever the hell it is will perhaps be stupid enough to put in that work, and most people will give up. Believe me, I want to fix society as much as you want to, and that starts with us seeing and connecting with people rather than objectifying them and putting them in a label or in a box or something like that. But if you need help, it's your job to fix it. There's answers out there. Go find them. Don't just stop it with this podcast or this video. Pick up the phone, seek some help, and take some action on it, because you can change.